A gentle mist rises above the quiet river. Tall reeds sway softly in the morning breeze. Birds begin their peaceful songs as the ancient world slowly awakens. Welcome. Tonight, we travel back more than 3,000 years to ancient Egypt. Not to witness great battles or the construction of towering pyramids. Instead, we're doing something different. We will quietly discover the everyday lives of ordinary people. The farmers, the fishermen, the craftsmen, the children, and the families who depended on one absolutely remarkable river, the Nile.
You see, without the Nile, ancient Egypt could never have existed. Every single year, its waters gently overflowed their banks. And when those floodwaters slowly disappeared, they left behind this incredibly rich, dark soil. This fertile earth was the absolute lifeline that allowed wheat, barley, onions, beans, and all sorts of vegetables to grow right beneath the warm Egyptian sun.
As the morning grows brighter, let's meet Ka. He's a young farmer stepping outside his small mud brick home. His family has lived beside the Nile for generations. Like his father and his grandfather before him, his entire life follows the quiet rhythm of the river. He walks slowly toward the fields, carrying a simple wooden hoe across his shoulder. Nearby, fishing boats drift peacefully across the calm water. Women collect fresh water in clay jars. Kids laugh quietly as they chase one another beside the riverbank. Everything feels calm. Everything feels familiar. For the people of ancient Egypt, the river isn't simply part of life, it is life itself.
Okay, let's dive into this, because Ka's life actually represents the vast majority of the population. Think about this. For over 3,000 years, more than 80% of the people in ancient Egypt were farmers just like him. 80%. They definitely weren't sitting on golden thrones, but make no mistake, these ordinary, hard-working citizens were the true, undisputed engine of the empire.
Section 1. The Rhythm of the River. To really understand Ka's life, we kind of have to toss out our modern calendar. His year had 3 distinct seasons, and they were driven entirely by the shifting temperament of the Nile River. It started with Akhet, the season of the flood, running roughly from June to September. Because the fields were completely underwater, farmers obviously couldn't grow crops. So instead they fulfilled a labor tax called corvée duty. And actually, that is exactly how those massive temples and pyramids got built. Next up came Peret, the season of emergence, from October to February. The floodwaters receded, leaving behind that incredibly fertile dark silt we talked about. This was prime planting time for staples like emmer wheat and barley. Finally, there was Shemu. This was the dry harvest season from March to May, and it was a literal race against time and the blazing sun to reap the crops.
And this brilliantly illustrates what that middle season, Peret, actually looked like. It was incredibly demanding. To keep crops alive, farmers used a fascinating tool called a shadoof. Picture this. They would endlessly dip a bucket attached to a long counterweighted pole right into the Nile, lift the heavy water up, and dump it into small irrigation canals, over and over again. It was grueling, back-breaking physical labor performed day in and day out beneath a scorching sun. But honestly, the hardest part of the year wasn't even the physical labor. It was tax time. During the harvest season of Shemu, government scribes would arrive to measure the fields. Now remember, ordinary ancient Egyptians didn't use money, so their harvest was literally their entire wealth. Often a staggering 50%, half, or sometimes even more, of a farmer's grain was collected as taxes. That grain went to feed the pharaoh, the priests, the military, and the artisans. So, to put that into perspective, the farmer's surplus is quite literally what kept the entire empire alive.
Section 2. Inside a mud brick home.
As the sun beats down on the fields, let's follow Ka back into his village. Imagine a place like the famous workers' settlement of Deir el-Medina, and let's explore a typical mud brick home. You'd picture a rectangular house built of mud brick and straw, arranged in a surprisingly practical, linear layout. You'd usually walk right into a front court that was completely unroofed. This was perfect for keeping a few animals, like pigs or donkeys, or for grinding grain in the fresh air. From there, you'd move into the middle room, which was really the heart of the home. It usually had a central wooden column, brightly painted walls, and a raised platform or dais for sitting. Then toward the back were the private sleeping quarters, alongside a kitchen area equipped with an oven and hearth.
When archaeologists study these homes, they uncover something super fascinating about the social dynamics of the family. You know, we often project our own modern assumptions onto the past, kind of expecting to find a strict division between male and female spaces. But in these ordinary villages, spaces were wonderfully egalitarian. Both men and women freely shared the front courts, the living areas, and the kitchens. The home was this highly practical environment that just adapted flexibly to whatever task needed doing, regardless of who was actually doing it. And let me tell you, they were far from empty spaces. These homes were filled with beautiful, functional items. Families slept on woven reed mats, using these curved wooden headrests to protect their elaborate hairstyles, which is wild to think about. They sat on simple wooden chairs, often charmingly carved with animal legs. Baskets and clay pots held their precious grain in linen clothing. And perhaps most importantly, tucked into little wall niches, you would find small, personal household shrines. These were dedicated to fiercely protective deities, like the lion-headed god Bes or the hippopotamus goddess Taweret, who specifically watched over mothers and children.
Section 3. Bread, beer, and daily meals.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast in culinary lifestyles. All that hard work in domestic management required serious fuel. For Khan and his fellow laborers, the diet was incredibly simple, highly repetitive, but packed with fiber and carbohydrates. They basically survived on thick, nutritious barley beer, coarse emmer wheat bread, onions, garlic, lentils, and maybe a fish caught straight from the Nile. Meanwhile, the wealthy elite, they were feasting on spit-roasted quail, barbecued beef, imported fine wines, and honey-sweetened desserts. For regular farmer, meat was an absolute luxury that they might only taste during a rare religious festival.
In fact, bread and beer were so utterly essential to survival that they transcended daily life and became deeply spiritual. When ancient Egyptians carved offering prayers onto tombs, the standard request for a happy afterlife was simply 1,000 of bread and 1,000 of beer. I mean, that was literally the ultimate ancient Egyptian comfort food.
Section 4. Work, play, and family. As evening falls and the tools are finally put away, the village dynamic shifts. Families gather in their shared mudbrick homes to just relax. For kids, the day was this interesting mix of immense freedom and gradual responsibility. We've actually found evidence of wonderful toys, wooden dolls, little animal figurines, and even pull-along toys with wheels. Kids spent a ton of time running, swimming, and wrestling down by the riverbank. But they were also apprentices. Most children learned essential trades and household management directly from their parents. Formal schooling in mathematics and hieroglyphics, that was a rare privilege, strictly reserved for the wealthy sons of the elite.
And adults definitely knew how to have fun too. One of the absolute most popular ways to unwind was playing a board game called Senate. Imagine a husband and wife sitting in their middle room under the soft light of an oil lamp, moving game pieces across a 30-square board. It was a game of strategy, blocking and leaping over your opponent's pieces. But it wasn't just for fun. It actually carried a deeper symbolism, representing the soul's successful obstacle-filled journey into the afterlife.
Section 5. The river's enduring legacy.
So the crucial point is, when we pull back from that intimate, lamplit scene of a family playing a board game, we can really see the grand macro perspective of this incredible civilization. To the ancient Egyptians, everything was deeply connected. The reliable annual flooding of the Nile, the sprouting of the wheat, the daily labor of the farmer, it was all an expression of Ma'at. Ma'at was the ancient concept of divine order, cosmic balance, and harmony. By tending their fields and living their lives according to the rhythm of the river, ordinary people weren't just surviving, they believed they were actively keeping the universe in perfect harmony.
We tend to focus entirely on the gold of the pharaohs and the magic of the gods, right? But the true foundation of Egypt was agricultural. The breathtaking temples, the sprawling tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the great pyramids themselves, literally none of it would exist without the surplus grain harvested by people like Kay. And let's not forget the grueling corvée labor they provided while their own fields were sitting underwater. Which leaves us with a pretty profound realization. We can rattle off the names of Ramses, Tutankhamun, and Cleopatra with no problem. But perhaps it is the nameless farmers, fishermen, and mothers living quietly beside the rhythm of the Nile who are the ones most deserving of our awe. Their names might not be written on massive statues, but their hands literally built the ancient world. So next time you look at a photograph of the pyramids, ask yourself, whose story are we really seeing? Keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next
Quiet History for Sleep. Farming the Gift of the River. Welcome to this special Wind Down Explainer. Tonight, we're going to take a really peaceful journey along the ancient Nile. So, I invite you right now to just take a slow, deep breath. Let go of the day's tasks, put away the screens, and just forget about the noise for a little while. Settle in, get comfortable, and let's travel back thousands of years to a place of profound, unchanging rhythm.
So, what was a quiet day actually like on the banks of the ancient Nile? Let's just dive right into this and step into the golden, unhurried light of the past. Imagine the morning sun shining brightly yet so gently across endless fertile fields. Let's leave behind all our modern rush and just walk alongside the people who lived here in the cool air of an ancient dawn.
The river rises, the river falls, and life begins again. There's just a deep, incredible comfort in this unchanging reality, isn't there? For thousands of years, this quiet rhythm rarely altered. The cool air of dawn would slowly, effortlessly give way to the warmth of another peaceful Egyptian day. Golden light reflecting gently upon the calm waters of the Nile. It was a world that didn't measure time in frantic minutes or hours, but really in the slow, generous breathing of the earth itself. You see, the ancient Egyptian farmer lived not by a modern paper calendar, but by a timeless natural cycle divided into 3 distinct seasons. First came Akhet, from June to September. That was the season of the inundation, when the Nile gently flooded the land. Then came Peret, from October to February, the season of emergence and planting as the waters slowly receded. And finally, Shemu, from March to May, the dry season of the golden harvest. This completely predictable cycle gracefully dictated their entire year. Now, this deep, comforting predictability was rooted in a concept known as Ma'at. Ma'at was the ancient Egyptian principle of cosmic order, balance, and harmony. But it wasn't just some high-level religious idea, It was a lived, everyday experience that sustained their entire cosmos. Every peaceful, methodical day in the valley, every single seed planted, and every harvest gathered was an expression of Ma'at. It was the comforting assurance that everything in the world was exactly as it should be.
Let's set our scene at dawn, right during the season of Peret. The floods of Akhet have just receded. We meet a farmer, let's call him Ka. He walks carefully across the soft, dark, incredibly fertile black silt left behind by the retreating waters. With every single step, he feels the sheer generosity of the Nile beneath his feet. Because without this magic ingredient, this rich earth, no wheat would grow, no barley would ripen, and absolutely no vegetables would fill the family's baskets. Let's move in and see how this builds. As the morning light gently brightens the fields, we witness a scene of truly patient, communal labor. Nearby, Ka's father guides 2 oxen pulling a simple wooden plow. The animals move slowly, patiently, their steady footsteps carving neat lines right into the moist earth. There are no noisy machines here, only the gentle sounds of birds, flowing water, and quiet voices. Women carry woven baskets, rhythmically scattering seeds of emmer wheat and barley. And behind them, children happily follow, using small branches to lightly cover those seeds with the soft soil. Even the youngest members of the family have important jobs. As the sun climbs higher, the warmth becomes stronger, and the workers pause beneath the cooling shade of tall date palms. They drink fresh, cool water from clay jars and enjoy a simple, nourishing midday rest. Breakfast, or lunch, is simple but totally wholesome and fiber-rich. We're talking fresh flatbread, a thick, highly nutritious beer made from their barley, sweet dates, crisp green onions, and maybe some dried fish caught right from the Nile. Nothing extravagant, yet perfectly enough to provide strength for another long morning of work. Now, while the golden pharaohs ruled from grand palaces and built massive temples, the ancient Egyptian farmers were the true unsung engines of the empire. Making up more than 80% of the population, their unhurried labor was literally the absolute foundation of this entire civilization. During the flood season, when their fields were totally underwater, it was these very farmers who provided the labor to build the pyramids. Their heavy crop taxes fed the artisans, the priests, the whole shebang. Across the river, the afternoon brings a soft breeze. Small fishing boats drift quietly along the gentle current, with their sails just catching the wind. Some fishermen cast wide nets into the sparkling water, while others patiently wait with simple lines. Now, the Nile never promises an easy catch, but most days, it definitely provides enough. Whether it's carp, Nile salmon, or the sacred sharp-nosed elephant fish, the river feeds absolutely everyone in different ways. And this brilliantly illustrates how the farmers worked in perfect harmony with the river. As afternoon approaches, the fields become alive with activity. Farmers repair small irrigation canals, and others guide water toward thirsty crops using a handmade tool called a shadaf. It's basically a long pole with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other. With each careful, rhythmic, almost hypnotic movement, they lift water from the Nile into those canals. Every precious drop flows exactly where it's needed beneath the hot Egyptian sun. Nothing is ever wasted. What is truly remarkable, actually kind of mind-blowing,
is that this agricultural system remained a stable, unchanging reality for over 3,000 years. Families leased plots of land, paying their taxes in grain. Because the contracts were renewed and inherited by the children, this incredibly deep knowledge of the land was passed down through generations. They survived and honestly thrived solely on the predictable kindness of the Nile.
Ka pauses for a moment and looks out across the endless green fields stretching toward the horizon. It's difficult to imagine life anywhere else, because just beyond that lush, fertile valley, only endless desert waits, hot, dry, completely silent. The Nile is so much more than a river. It's this narrow, precious ribbon of life, suspended between two endless, unlivable worlds of sand. To stay near the water is quite literally to stay near life itself. No wonder they never wanted to escape it. As dusk finally arrives, the afternoon breeze gently rustles the growing crops, and the pace of life slows completely. Ka smiles quietly to himself. Another successful planting season has begun, and if the Nile remains kind, the harvest will once again provide enough food for every family. He returns tired but incredibly peaceful to his simple mud brick home. Sitting down with his family on woven reed mats for a quiet evening meal, the village just grows completely still under a vast, starry sky. As the night settles over the valley, the eternal rhythm of the river continues its flow in the dark. The seeds are in the ground, the work of the day is done, and the cosmic balance of Ma'at is maintained. The ancient farmer closes his eyes, trusting in the cycle. But as he drifts to sleep, a quiet question always lingers in the dark. Will the river rise again tomorrow? For over 3,000 years, the answer was yes. So sleep well and let the quiet currents of history carry you into a peaceful... Welcome to this quiet edition of our explainer. I'm really glad you're here with us. Tonight, we're actually going to slow things way down. We're taking a gentle, atmospheric journey back in time. So let's step away from the grand pharaohs and those massive stone monuments for a bit, and instead just settle into the calm, predictable rhythms of an ancient Egyptian evening. Picture a soft, slow breeze drifting across the quiet water as the workday finally ends along the eternal river. Just let your mind relax, focus on this gentle story, and let's explore a simpler time together. Okay, let's dive right into this quiet world. As they say, the hardest work of the day is almost finished. The afternoon sun is just beginning to soften, casting this beautiful golden hue over the valley. Farmers who've literally spent hours sweating under the open sky are slowly making their way back from the fields. Out on the water, fishing boats are gliding so peacefully toward the riverbank, with their sails just catching the very last of the daytime breeze. Meanwhile, children are running along the dusty paths, laughing quietly before it's time for supper. Everything is just winding down, settling into a familiar, comforting twilight. Section 1. The river grows quiet. The rhythms of the Nile at dusk. You know, life beside the Nile never truly stopped. It just followed a very predictable, peaceful rhythm. And this rhythm governed the lives of over 80% of the ancient Egyptian population, the farmers, who were really the unsung heroes of the entire empire. They didn't live by a 12-month calendar like you and I do today. Instead, their whole existence was wonderfully synchronized with the heartbeat of the river. It was this endless, eternal cycle that dictated every single aspect of their quiet lives, year after year. First up was Akhet, the season of the flood, when the land essentially rested under a blanket of rich, dark water. Then, as those waters receded, came Peret, the growing season, where seeds were gently pressed into the moist earth. And finally, Shemu, the golden harvest season. It was a cycle as reliable as the sunrise, and it brought this deep, profound sense of order and safety to their world. Section 2. Inside the mudbrick sanctuary, finding cool refuge from the day. So, as the sun dips lower, let's move away from the riverbank and into the small, crowded mudbrick villages nestled right along the edge of the fertile valley. Picture a worker, maybe an artisan named Ka, carrying his wooden tools home. His small mudbrick house stands among several others, quietly shaded by tall, swaying date palms. And the contrast of their environment here is just brilliant. From the outside, the home looks incredibly simple, but those thick walls made entirely of Nile mud and straw were a true sanctuary. They practically absorb the intense, relentless heat of the Egyptian sun all day long, keeping the inside beautifully cool. They even have these high windows, really just small openings near the ceiling, designed perfectly to let the warm air escape, creating a gentle, protective draft. It was the ultimate haven of shade and rest. Section 3.
Simple comforts and furniture. Rest for the weary worker. Stepping inside the home, you immediately feel this cool, packed earth floor right beneath your feet. And thanks to the remarkably well-preserved tomb of that artisan Ka and his wife Merit, we actually know exactly what these quiet domestic spaces looked like. Their home wasn't cluttered at all. It held a purposeful simplicity that feels, honestly, incredibly grounding.
Nothing is luxurious, yet everything has its purpose. While they really didn't have much by modern standards, every single item in that house brought immense comfort and stability to their daily life. There was just a profound sense of peace in knowing exactly where everything belonged.
Just picture these simple, purposeful comforts. You've got woven reed mats covering the ground, soft underfoot, low wooden stools standing patiently beside a small table, large porous clay jars resting against the walls, which naturally chilled their drinking water, and a wooden bed fitted with a gracefully carved wooden headrest. Imagine what it felt like to sit on that low stool after a long, exhausting day, feeling entirely secure within your own sanctuary.
Section 4. Aromas from the hearth. Preparing the evening meal. Now let's wander to the rear of the house, to the kitchen area. This is where the family starts preparing the evening meal. A warm fire crackles gently inside a small clay oven. The bustling sounds of the day outside are completely replaced by the intimate, cozy sounds of supper being made.
So that brings up an interesting question. What was actually left for the farmer to eat after the harvest? I mean, after the heavy taxes were paid to the state in the form of grain, what did the family actually have? Well, their diet was simple, and it rarely changed. But it was deeply nourishing and perfectly suited to sustain them through all that demanding physical labor. Just slowly imagine the warm, comforting aromas filling that quiet room as everything comes together. You've got freshly baked emmer wheat bread, pulled warm right from the clay oven. A large clay pot gently simmering over the fire, filled with lentils, onions, garlic, and herbs, all slowly cooking down into a thick, simple stew. Maybe a cup of thick, nutritious barley beer to pass around. And for a little touch of sweetness, a handful of soft, dark dates. On a rare occasion, maybe some fresh fish or roasted duck, but most nights, bread and vegetables were more than enough.
The slow, steady sound of grinding stones fills the quiet room. Before that bread can even be baked, the grain has to be prepared. Ka's mother carefully grinds the wheat into fine flour using 2 smooth, heavy grinding stones. The slow, rhythmic sound of stone against stone echoing in the room, it's a daily meditative task that just grounded the whole household. A soothing repetition that gently signals the day is truly coming to an end.
Section 5. Evening play and chores. Children in the twilight. As the food gently simmers, our focus shifts over to the younger children. You might notice some of them wearing that distinctive side-lock hairstyle, a single braid on one side of a shaved head that marked their youth. In this skating twilight, they're staying busy too, helping out with small, manageable chores.
Even those simple tasks like fetching water from a nearby well or gathering dry reeds for tomorrow's cooking fire taught them responsibility. But as the chores wrap up, the evening quietly winds down with some gentle recreation. The children play with simple wooden dolls. And eventually, the whole family might gather around a board game called Senet.
Senet, a popular strategy board game with 30 squares, symbolically alluding to the passage into the afterlife. What's really fascinating about this is how dual purpose it was. Moving those little pieces across the 30 squares was definitely a relaxing pastime, a great way to bond in the dimming light. But it was also a gentle, constant reminder of the continuous cycle of existence. Section 6. Starlight on the Nile, ascending to the roof. Finally, when the sun completely sets, the family gathers together to eat. There's no hurry at all, no loud distractions, only quiet conversation, sharing bowls of warm stew, fresh bread, and cool water. Outside, the village grows entirely peaceful as the very last fishermen pull their boats onto the dark shore. As the late evening builds, you can see the golden sky slowly turning shades of orange and pink before fading into a deep, velvety blue as the first bright stars appear above the Nile. With the intense heat of the day finally gone, the family climbs the narrow staircase up to the flat roof of their home. Up there, they can catch the cool, refreshing night breeze, just looking out over the quiet river as it reflects the moonlight. Mat, the ancient concept of order, balance, and harmony that sustained the Egyptian cosmos.
Sitting up there under the stars, everything feels incredibly calm. Everything feels totally safe. This exact feeling is the embodiment of Maat. In this quiet village, bathed in moonlight, the world just feels perfectly, beautifully balanced. For the Egyptians, there was no sharp divide between life and the afterlife. Rather, existence was seen as a continuous cycle. And that's the crucial point here. This peaceful, predictable daily routine, the hard work, the cool mudbrick walls, the warm bread, the quiet starlit evenings, it was a comforting rhythm they loved so, so deeply. They cherished it so much that they actually furnished their tombs with these exact same everyday objects, just wishing to carry that perfect, quiet harmony right with them into eternity.
Life beside the Nile never truly stops. Tomorrow, the sun will rise once again. The river will continue its endless, gentle journey north. The fields will wait patiently. Life here simply follows the exact same peaceful rhythm, day after day, year after remarkable year. As darkness settles across the ancient sands, what quiet rhythms guide your own rest tonight? As the village falls asleep under that vast, starry sky, we're kind of reminded of our own universal need for a safe, quiet home. I really hope this journey has brought you a sense of peace and leaves you feeling relaxed, tranquil, and totally ready for a deep, restful sleep. Good night.
Welcome to our explainer. Today we're diving into a really beautiful, quiet piece of history. We're taking a relaxing journey into the daily life of ancient Egypt. Just picture this. The bright afternoon sun is slowly beginning its journey toward the western horizon. A gentle breeze cools the warm air right along the Nile River. The busiest hours of work have passed, and the fields are growing quieter. Fishing boats drift peacefully across the calm water, and children's voices echo softly through the village. So, let's step into this quiet world and explore how ancient Egyptians learned, grew, and lived.
You know, for young Egyptians, growing up meant so much more than simply getting older. Literally every single day was another chance to learn something new. But for most children born into farming families, there were absolutely no classrooms, no wooden desks, and for sure, no printed books. Instead, life itself became the teacher. Imagine a young boy, let's call him Ka, sitting quietly, watching his father carefully repair a wooden farming tool. Every single movement is slow, patient, and precise. And without saying very much at all, his father is teaching an incredibly important lesson. Take care of your tools, and they'll take care of you.
Section 1. The Living Classroom.
And right nearby, Ka's mother is teaching his younger sister how to bake fresh bread. It's a deeply hands-on process. First, you moisten the tough emmer wheat, then pound it gently with a pestle, and sift the coarse flour right in the sun. She carefully measures out that flour, adds water, and kneads the dough with these incredibly practiced hands. Before long, the amazing smell of warm bread fills their little home.
And here's something wild. They relied entirely on the natural world for this. They didn't have packets of yeast from the store. They captured wild, airborne yeast strains straight from the Nile's breeze to give their bread its soft rise and sweet flavor. It's just brilliant. Small, natural lessons like this really prepared these children for adult life, connecting them directly to the earth and the river.
Section 2. The Scribe's Quiet Work.
But, you know, not every child became a farmer. Some boys were fortunate enough to attend a school for scribes, which was often called the House of Life. Just imagine stepping out of the sun-drenched fields and inside this cool, quiet building near the temple. Young students sit cross-legged upon woven mats, embarking on a totally different kind of education.
Now, I want to put this into perspective. Only 1 in 100 ancient Egyptians could read and write. That's a tiny, highly privileged fraction of the population. Inside the House of Life, each of these rare students holds a smooth wooden writing board. They watch their teachers slowly write out strange symbols called hieroglyphs, and then, carefully, the students copy each symbol. They copy them again and again and again, because writing was not easy. It wasn't just mental, it was highly physical. Think about the classic posture of a seated scribe, perfectly balanced, intense focus, papyrus resting right on their laps. It took absolute stillness, patience, and massive concentration to properly record the world around them.
And it was literally a lifelong dedication. We're talking about entering the House of Life at just 5 years old. Then follows 12 years of rigorous daily repetition. If you stuck with it, you'd emerge around age 17 as a master of hundreds of complex symbols. And those who mastered it, well, they might one day work for the government, record taxes, write letters, keep important records, or even help build those magnificent temples.
Becoming a scribe was, for sure, one of the most respected careers in all of ancient Egypt.
To pull off this vital work, scribes needed a very specific toolkit. They used papyrus made from river plants, fine reed brushes, black carbon ink for standard text, and red ochre ink for headings to make things pop. They even used wooden and limestone flakes, which they called ostraka, just for writing drafts. It was elegant, incredibly precise work, and honestly, you can almost hear the quiet scraping of a reed brush on papyrus.
Now, being a scribe brought huge privileges, like being completely exempt from heavy manual labor and taxes, but it also carried a massive physical toll. We're talking degenerative wear in the spine, joints, and even the jaw from holding brushes in their mouths for hours on end. So as the afternoon slowly fades, our young farmer Ka might wonder what life would be like if he could read every symbol carved upon the temple walls. But he doesn't feel any sadness, because his own knowledge is just different. He understands the river, the soil, the seasons, the stars. He knows the quiet language of the land itself. Every person has something valuable to learn, and every skill has its purpose.
Section 3. The Rhythm of Numbers. So while Khan was reading the land, the scribes were literally measuring it. They recorded the harvest using standard units like the hekat, which is equivalent to about 4.8 liters. Recording this grain was a vital, harmonious rhythm of the scribe's daily life, keeping the whole civilization running smoothly.
To manage all this math, scribes would practice perfect division on plaster-coated wooden writing boards. Artifacts like the Akhmim wooden tablets from around 1950 BCE literally hold the secrets of how they did this. Students would use these as temporary surfaces to figure out exact grain divisions.
And the math gets really fascinating here. A single hekat was divided into exactly 64 parts to ensure perfect mathematical balance in the granaries. But, while the scribes were breaking down measurements into 64 fractions, out in the fields for families like Ka's, the day wasn't divided by math at all. It was divided by the sun. For the scribes, integrating these exact partitions ensured that no grain went unaccounted for. It avoided rounding errors and made sure everyone got their fair ration. But as the golden sunlight begins to soften, the focus shifts for everyone. Children finish their very daily lessons, some return home carrying baskets, while others help feed the goats and sheep. The whole village is slowly settling into another peaceful evening.
Section 4. Games in Fading Light.
And of course, as the day's hard work concluded, it was finally time to play. But even in their evening play, children were learning. They'd use toys with moving parts, like a little wooden mobile mill that actually mimicked the rhythmic grinding of grain, teaching them the motions of adulthood through play. They'd also have these simple, really beautiful toys, like a wooden doll with hair crafted straight from Nile mud and bees. With toys like these in hand, children would act out stories before bedtime, watching the atmosphere completely transform. Across the Nile, the setting sun is painting the water with just beautiful shades of gold and orange. The evening brought all sorts of soothing ways to unwind. Kids played guessing games in the dimming light, or quiet games of thought like Dama. Some did acrobatic balancing and jumping in the cooling sand, or played with carved animal shapes. It was the perfect way to develop their minds and bodies as the palm trees swayed gently in the breeze.
Section 5. A peaceful evening rest. The village slowly settles. Birds glide silently toward their nests. The golden sunlight completely fades into deep night. Another day of learning has quietly come to an end. But tomorrow there will be more lessons, more work, more discoveries. Because beside the timeless Nile, learning never truly ends. It simply continues, one peaceful day at a time. And so, our relaxing journey through ancient Egypt gently comes to a close, but it leaves us with something to think about. As the timeless Nile flows continuously through the dark, what quiet lessons does your own world whisper to you as you drift to sleep? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to completely leave the loud, chaotic noise of our modern world behind us and gently step into the fascinating daily rhythms of ancient Egypt. We're going to explore what it actually took to put a simple meal on the table thousands of years ago. Our source material today invites us to do something really quite unique. Instead of rushing through those epic tales of dynasties and pharaohs and massive battles, we are going to just linger quietly beside the river. We're going to step inside the warm, mudbrick homes and gather around village ovens to truly understand the calm, everyday reality of their lives. It's a peaceful journey into the quiet work that sustained an entire civilization. Section 1. The Rhythm of the Nile. So how exactly did the river shape daily life? Well, our journey starts with the endless, life-giving flow of the water itself. Because to understand the peace of the Egyptian evening meal, we really have to first understand how the Nile dictated literally every waking moment, every harvest, and every single ration. This wasn't just a body of water. Actually, scratch that. It was the ultimate clock and calendar for their whole world. It told them exactly when to work, when to rest, and how much food they were going to have for the entire year. Take a look at this cycle. Between July and November, the river would completely burst its banks. Then by September or October, it receded, and it left behind this thick layer of incredibly fertile, dark silt. To track this, priests would quietly read what was known as a nilometer. Picture a deep well with stone steps and vertical columns. By reading those water levels every single day, these priests could actually predict the volume of the incoming flood. A good flood meant rich soil and bountiful harvests, right? But a poor one? Well, that meant famine. It was a cycle that demanded absolute respect.
Section 2. Grinding the emmer wheat.
Now, notice the stark difference here between the wheat we use today and the grain they relied on back then. Unlike our modern, super easily processed soft wheat, ancient Egyptians cultivated something called emmer, which you might know as farro. Emmer is a remarkably hardy grain, for sure, but it comes with this heavy, stubborn husk. It doesn't just flake off. Preparing it required an immense amount of patience, and honestly, just sheer physical effort. As the floods receded and the crops grew, the hardest daily work began long before sunrise. Because the chaff came in spikelets, first the women of the household had to gently moisten the grain and pound it with a heavy pestle, being super careful not to crush the precious kernel inside. Then it was dried in the warm sun, winnowed, sieved, and finally painstakingly ground by hand on a heavy stone called a saddle corn. The result was a coarse flour that often contained bits of husk and even desert sand. And because it went rancid so quickly, they could only grind exactly what they needed for that single day. A modern baker actually recreated this ancient bread using traditional emmer, and that's where this quote comes from. Baked in glowing clay ovens, this coarse flour yielded a dense, fragrant triangle or round-shaped loaf. It was not the light, fluffy sandwich bread we're used to. It was a substantial, nutty, slightly gritty loaf that served as the absolute heart of every family's daily diet. It was heavy enough to fuel a long day of hard labor under the hot Egyptian sun.
Section 3. Bread, beer, and rations.
But here is where the story of this grain gets even more fascinating. Emmer wasn't just physical sustenance. It was literally the currency and the mathematical foundation of their entire society. To manage this vital resource, a tiny elite class of scribes, we're talking barely 1% of the population, controlled the wealth of the nation. They meticulously measured grain into a standard unit called the hekot, which was about 4.8 liters. These scribes kept the whole civilization from collapsing by perfectly tracking every single hekot in the granaries. And to ensure precise and equitable rations for all the workers and priests, these scribes divided the hekot into 64 smaller parts. They used this brilliant system called Horus I binary fractions. It was just an incredibly clever way to take a massive bulk commodity and break it down into perfectly manageable mathematical portions so that absolutely no grain was ever wasted. To master this, young scribes practiced on tools like the Akhmim wooden tablets, which date all the way back to around 1950 BCE. These were plaster-coated writing boards where they practiced dividing the hekot by odd numbers, like 3 or 7, and when the math didn't divide perfectly into 64 parts, they used a tiny subsidiary unit called the row to calculate the exact remainder. They did these calming, repetitive exercises to guarantee that every single worker received their exact, fair ration of grain and thick, cloudy barley beer.
Section 4. The evening meal.
So, with the math solved and the hard labor of the day finally winding down, the Egyptian village grows quiet once again. The afternoon sun hangs beautifully above the fertile valley, and it's time to eat. Food here is simple, fresh, and deeply connected to the river. Let's picture a family gathering, maybe a young boy named Ka, watching as his mother prepares a large clay bowl of comforting lentil stew. She adds onions, garlic, leeks, and fragrant herbs from the garden. Beside that, tilapia freshly caught by his brother in a woven net early that morning, roasting slowly over glowing coals until the skin turns golden and crisp. They break those dense, round loaves of emmer bread and drink that thick barley beer, which was super nutritious and much safer than drinking straight river water. On special festival days, they might even have duck or goose, but meat was rare. Instead, baskets overflowed with sweet dates, figs, juicy grapes, and crunchy cucumbers. There's no rush, no loud conversation, just quiet voices and grateful hearts as the youngest children eat first and the bowls are carefully shared.
Section 5. A quiet journey continues.
As the warmth of the meals settles in and the evening breeze gently sways the palm trees outside, childhood takes center stage. In this fading light, children played quietly with simple toys. On the left, there's a woven bamboo mobile mill game designed to mimic the grinding work of the adults. And on the right, a beautifully crafted wooden doll with elaborate braided hair. Winding down their day in the safety of the mudbrick home, the children mirrored the peaceful, steady rhythm of their parents' lives.
Outside, the golden light slowly fades across the Nile. The river continues its endless journey north, just as it has done for thousands of years. Ka finishes his final piece of bread and quietly thanks his mother. Tomorrow, the fields will once again need tending, the boats will return to the water, and the bread will bake before sunrise. It's a peaceful cycle that repeated generation after generation. As darkness gently settles across ancient Egypt, our relaxing journey beside the timeless river continues. It leaves us wondering, as we rush through our own noisy modern lives, how much of that quiet, grounded rhythm still lives on inside us?
You know, when we think about ancient Egypt, our minds usually go straight to the massive pyramids, the golden pharaohs, and all those epic battles. But today, we're actually going to leave the noise of the dynasties behind. Instead, we're taking a look at a completely different side of history. In this explainer, we're going to explore the quiet, ingenious, everyday rhythms that literally sustained one of the greatest civilizations in human history. So let's travel back a few thousand years, right to the banks of the ancient Nile. The golden afternoon sun slowly begins to soften. A gentle breeze drifts across the quiet waters of the Nile. The busiest hours in the fields have passed. Farmers gather their tools, fishermen pull their boats onto the sandy riverbank. The peaceful rhythm of another Egyptian day continues. You know, it's pretty incredible to just sit and think about this pace of life. In our modern, clock-driven, hyper-connected world, time is something we're constantly racing against. But back then, time didn't move by the hour or the minute. It moved entirely at nature's pace.
Okay, let's dive into this. For the ancient Egyptians, survival absolutely revolved around the river. I mean, it was everything. Their version of modern data tracking was something called the Nilometer. Priests would quietly and carefully monitor these incredible stone structures, just watching the water levels rise against calibrated steps or columns. A perfect measurement, that meant a bountiful harvest. But if it was too low, that meant famine. Too high, and you had destructive floods. The rhythm of this single river completely dictated their survival and their daily work.
To truly get a feel for this world, let's follow a real historical figure. His name is Ka. Imagine we're time travelers, just quietly observing him. We see the busy hours in the fields have passed, and Ka walks toward the small marketplace beside the river. The path is shaded by these tall date palms. Birds are singing softly overhead. The village is winding down from the day's work, but it's still buzzing with this deeply purposeful, fascinating activity.
Now, this quiet marketplace operated entirely without coins. None at all. It was a community built purely on localized, tactile exchanges. So a basket of onions might be traded for fresh fish caught just that morning, a loaf of bread for a carefully smooth clay pot. There were absolutely no loud machines here, no factories churning out goods, just skilled hands crafting beautiful woven baskets of papyrus and fine linen cloth from flax. It was just a simple, familiar, barter-driven economy.
As you walk through this market, imagine the warm, comforting smell of fresh bread drifting through the air. Bread was the absolute foundation of the Egyptian diet and economy. Pretty much everyone ate it daily. But the grain they used, called emmer wheat, was incredibly stubborn. It's this ancient grain with a super heavy husk, which means it required immense patience to process. You couldn't just thresh it easily. You really had to coax the grain out, making daily survival a literal feat of endurance.
And this brilliantly illustrates the unhurried nature of their lives, because making this bread was a massive daily labor of patience and ancient engineering. Because of that stubborn husk, they had to moisten and gently pound the spikelets with a pestle just to avoid crushing the grain inside. Then it was dried in the sun, winnowed, and milled by hand on a saddle corn, usually by the women of the household, producing a coarse flour. Then comes the brilliant chemistry part. They would cultivate wild yeasts naturally present in the Nile air, and finally bake the dough in these tall clay cones over a square hearth.
Every object is made by hand. Only skilled hands working slowly and carefully. Take a breath and just imagine living in a world where literally every single item you own is crafted this way. In this society, from the potters to the weavers to the bakers, every craft was learned through years of quiet observation and tactile practice. The work never truly ended, sure, but it also never rushed. But behind this world of tactile, manual labor, there was a tiny, incredibly powerful group managing the flow of the entire civilization. Get this, barely 1% of the ancient Egyptian population possessed what was essentially an absolute superpower back then: reading and writing. These were the scribes.
It's actually astonishing when you look at the stark contrast. Just 1% of the population managed the vast granaries, calculated the taxes, organized temple offerings, and coordinated trade along the Nile for the other 99%. Because of this, they held a deeply privileged position, totally exempt from hard manual labor. Armed with a palette containing distinct red and black ink and a simple brush fashioned from a reed, this tiny elite quietly held the complex machinery of Egypt together.
Now, when you think of Egyptian writing, you're probably picturing hieroglyphics, right? Those beautiful, elaborate pictorial symbols carved into stone monuments. Actually, scratch that. You couldn't use those to quickly count baskets of grain at a busy market, so scribes used something called hieratic. This was a much faster, cursive script written on papyrus. Imagine a scribe sitting quietly in the shade of a date palm, his reed brush gliding swiftly across a sheet, perfectly recording the village's daily grain rations in this highly practical shorthand.
So, what exactly were they recording? Well, mostly grain. They measured this using a unit called the hecat, which is roughly 4.8 liters. What is deeply fascinating here is the sheer mathematical genius of their system. It's essentially ancient computer logic. They divided the hecat into 64 parts, using Horus-I binary fractions. To avoid any waste or unfairness, scribes trained using wooden tablets to calculate exact divisions of grain down to the absolute last fraction. It was a rhythmic system of perfect balance and equity.
Rather than rushing through dynasties and battles, linger beside the river, inside mudbrick homes, around village ovens, in scribal rooms. This reminds us that the true heartbeat of history isn't always found in grand, noisy battles or royal decrees. It's found in the quiet, ordinary work, measuring the grain, baking the bread, trading the fish. That is what truly sustained this civilization over millennia.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that we can actually look at the exact tangible tools owned by the man we've been following, Khan. Khan was a prominent architect who oversaw major projects during the 18th dynasty at Deir el-Medina. Miraculously, his brilliantly crafted wooden case for balancing scales, along with his personalized folding wooden cubit rod, survived completely intact in his tomb. It offers us a direct physical link to his daily life.
Khan and his fellow masons built monuments that lasted thousands of years, and they did it using incredibly simple, elegant tools. They used those folding wooden cubits to measure length, intricately carved amulet-shaped plumb bobs suspended by string to find perfect verticals, A-frame wooden levels to check horizontals, and long knotted ropes to lay out grand foundations. These are the exact same fundamental principles of leveling and measuring we use in modern construction today, all executed by the patient hands of ancient craftsmen. As the day draws to a close, the marketplace begins to grow quieter. The last customers return home. Potters cover their clay, boatmen tie their vessels to the wooden posts along the riverbank, and Ka leaves his tools and trade behind, walking home as the evening gently but purposefully settles over the village.
As the heat of the day lifts, the sounds of the village change. You start to hear the distant, happy sounds of children playing. The ancient Egyptians cherished children, and they crafted the most amazing, intricate toys for them. Take a look at this beautiful Middle Kingdom toy, made of carved ivory. 3 dwarves on a pedestal, brilliantly designed to move and dance with just the pull of a thread. So, the crucial point is that even in their play, there was a sense of profound purpose. Another fascinating mobile wooden toy represents a man leaning over, grinding grain, mimicking the very saddle querns used to make emmer wheat flour. By playing with these beautifully hand-carved figures, children were joyfully, softly prepared for the unhurried, rhythmic adult work that awaited them. Play was essentially this brilliant psychological bridge between childhood and the life of the village.
The golden sunlight dances its final steps across the calm river. A flock of white birds glides silently above the cooling water. Tomorrow, the market will open once again, and life beside the timeless Nile will quietly follow the same peaceful rhythm. The boats will sail, the grain will be measured, the bread will bake. It is a stunning, unbroken cycle of resilience and continuity.
Just as it did for thousands of years, the river continues to flow. It's a wonderful reminder of the beauty found in routine, in patience, and in the careful work of our own hands. As we end our explainer today, and the sun sets on the timeless Nile, I want to leave you with this thought to reflect on. In our fast-paced modern world, what quiet, purposeful...
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a slightly different approach. I want to invite you to just take a deep breath and relax. We're going to journey back in time, stepping completely away from the bustling, sun-baked daytime of history and into the quiet, dusky evening of ancient Egypt. This is a bit of quiet history for sleep. We're going to explore the peaceful, hidden side of a civilization that we usually only associate with massive pyramids and golden pharaohs.
So let's dive into this. Where did the ancients go to find peace at the end of the day? It's a really fascinating question, isn't it? When that relentless Egyptian heat finally broke and the shadows started to lengthen, where did ordinary people, the builders, the farmers, the families, where did they go to find a moment of spiritual reflection and quiet? How exactly did they wind down when the world around them grew dark? I want you to picture this scene. The warm afternoon slowly begins to fade. Golden sunlight reflects across the peaceful waters of the Nile. The fields grow quiet. The fishermen are gently rowing their boats back home. The marketplace closes for another day. You can almost feel the cooling air rising off the river. Yet for many Egyptians, one final journey remains, a visit to the temple.
Part 1. Dusk on the Nile. The journey begins. To really understand this world, let's look through the eyes of a real historical figure. Meet Ka. He was the chief of the Great Place, living in the village of Deir el-Medina. Ka was a highly skilled, esteemed foreman. By day, he directed the workmen who were carving out these massive royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. But tonight, as the sun sets, Ka isn't a foreman. He is just a man seeking a moment of rest after a really long, exhausting day in the dust and stone. As Ka walks slowly along a dusty path lined with tall palm trees, he isn't just looking at a river. You know, to the Egyptians, the river was actually a god named Hapi. Hapi was the divine personification of the Nile's annual flood. Usually depicted as this androgynous, pot-bellied deity, Hapi represented total nourishment and abundance. The river's carefully measured floods brought life-giving silt to the fields, and in the evening, a cool, divine relief to the skin.
Let's follow Khan as he steps off that dusty path and heads toward a magnificent stone structure rising right above the village. Part 2, Houses of the Divine, Sanctuaries of Stone.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand how the ancients actually viewed these buildings. The Egyptian word for temple was hut-nenger, which literally translates to mansion of a god. These massive stone structures, with their thick, insulated walls, weren't community gathering places or public churches like we kind of think of today. No, they were literal, physical homes designed to sustain the gods, allowing the divine to reside on earth and maintain the entire order of the universe. As Ka steps inside, the sounds of the outside world just melt away. The thick stone walls block out the heat, keeping the temple wonderfully quiet. And this brilliantly illustrates the architectural genius of the Egyptians. Walking into spaces like the Great Hypostyle Hall was meant to be a sensory experience of the world's actual creation. The massive stone columns, carved to look like closed-bud papyrus plants, represented Zep Tepi, the primordial marsh of creation, those swampy origins where life first emerged. As Ka rests in the quiet shadows of these columns, thin beams of golden light illuminating clouds of fragrant incense right above him, he's surrounded by a massive, invisible presence. Historians estimate there were roughly 1,500 known deities in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. I mean, just think about that. This illustrates a vast, incredibly complex web of divine forces that governed absolutely everything in their lives, from the blazing sun overhead to the quiet silence of the night. While Ka sits peacefully, deeper inside the temple, the unseen work of the priests continues. Part 3. Offerings and Quiet Rituals, the Daily Care. In the hushed sanctuary, surrounded by the gentle melodies of a wooden harp and soft drums, lector priests quietly perform an incredibly intimate ritual. They light a small oil lamp, its flame flickering softly.
They carefully wash and anoint the physical statue of the god, dress it in clean linen, and present a lavish meal of fresh bread, sweet dates, and beautiful lotus flowers gathered from the Nile. This wasn't symbolic worship. It was practical, daily care for the divine being living right there in their city.
Now you might be wondering, what happened to all that food? Well, it operated on a fascinating economic system called the reversion of offerings. The belief was that the god only consumed the spiritual essence of the meal. Once that invisible nourishment was taken, the physical items, the bread, the fruit, the meat, were redistributed. This clever system physically sustained the massive staff of priests and temple workers.
But religion wasn't just happening in these grand state temples. It lived in the homes of people like Ka and his wife, Merit. Part 4. Gods of the Everyday, the Divine in the Mundane.
For ordinary Egyptians, faith was literally woven into every single breath. They had highly relatable personal gods. There was Bes, a squat, fierce-looking dwarf god whose grotesque face was deliberately meant to scare evil spirits and nightmares back into the dark while you slept. There was Tawaret, the fiercely protective hippo goddess who guarded mothers and children. There was Shu, the god of the cooling air you felt on your skin, and Neper, the god of the grain in your bread.
Real faith lived in small kitchens and quiet bedrooms. For Ka and Merit, these gods were as real and present as the wind. You couldn't see the wind, but you definitely felt it. Before going to sleep, they would whisper prayers to these familiar protectors, leaving small offerings on household shrines, completely relying on them to guard their vulnerable sleeping children against the dangers of the night.
As the narrative of our explainer deepens into the dark, we have to shift our focus to the cosmic drama unfolding above and below the sleeping world. Part 5. Guardians of the Night, the sun's dark journey.
While mortals like Kafah slept, the most powerful gods were embarking on their most dangerous work. They entered the Duat. The Duat was a mysterious, perilous underworld region associated with death and rebirth. It was a place of shadows and threats, where the fate of the entire universe was decided every single night while humanity was resting.
And this brings us to the exhausting, endless vigilance of the sun god, Ra. During his daytime journey, Ra glided safely across the sky, bringing warmth and light. But his nighttime journey? That was a terrifying battle. Ra descended into the Duat on a solar boat, fiercely fighting off the giant chaos serpent Apophis. Every night was a battle for survival. So the really crucial takeaway here is, if Ra ever failed in the dark, the sun would literally never rise again.
And while Ra fought in the underworld, another great god maintained a very different kind of vigilance. Osiris, the lord of the afterlife, did not sleep, but he represented a kind of eternal rest. Wrapped in linen, crowned with eternity, Osiris maintained a quiet, eternal stillness, holding the balance of the afterlife inside his silent vigil, watching over the souls of the departed.
All of these nightly rituals, all of these fierce divine battles in the dark, served one central, overarching purpose. Part 6. The balance of Ma'at, cosmic order.
Ma'at was the ultimate goal of every prayer, every offering, and every breath in ancient Egypt. She was the fixed, eternal order of the universe, encompassing truth, justice, and total balance. Without Ma'at, the stars would fall, the Nile would dry up, and chaos, known as Isfet, would reign. The entire society, from the pharaoh all the way down to a simple foreman like Ka, cooperated to maintain Ma'at so that they could simply close their eyes at night in safety.
Which brings us right back to our friend Ka. Sitting peacefully beside a cool stone column in the temple, he measures the safety of his world by the quiet stability of his gods. He knows that as long as the priests make their offerings, as long as Ra sails safely through the Duat, and as long as Bes guards his home, Ma'at is intact. If the gods were still and the universe was balanced, then so could he be. The temple visit gently comes to an end. Ka steps back out into the evening air. The warm breeze moves softly across the Nile. Inside the sanctuary, the priests extinguish the final oil lamps, letting the darkness take over. Ka walks home to his wife Merit under a sky full of stars, completely at peace, knowing his world sleeps safely under the watchful eyes of the divine. We leave you with this final thought. As the evening shadows gently stretch across the Nile Valley in our minds, it kind of makes you wonder about your own life. What quiet forces, routines, or moments of peace hold your world in balance tonight? Thank you for joining me for this explainer.
May you find your own quiet history tonight and
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We are slowing things way down. We're going to explore the historical realities of an evening in ancient Egypt, specifically focusing on the beautifully peaceful rhythm of a festival night. So, let go of the day's rush, get comfortable, and let's travel back thousands of years to the banks of the Nile.
Let's start with this incredible observation from our sources. The quiet rhythm of Egypt gently prepared itself for another calm and unhurried night. You know, what's so fascinating about this, in the mindset it reveals, life in the ancient Nile Valley wasn't measured in minutes or hours. It was measured in the steady, predictable cycles of the sun and the river. As the golden sun slowly begins its descent toward the western desert, the entire landscape just takes a deep, collective breath.
And then, a beautiful physical shift happens. The intense heat of the day gently fades. A cool breeze glides across the calm waters of the Nile, and palm leaves whisper softly in the evening air. Another peaceful day is slowly coming to an end. The mud-brick walls of the village homes, which have been absorbing that intense sun all day long, now begin to slowly release their warmth into the cooling twilight. The air simply feels easier to breathe. To really get a feel for this, let's ground our journey in a real place with real people. Let's head over to Deir el-Medina. This was the ancient workmen's village where the highly skilled artisans who built the royal tombs lived. Among them were a foreman named Ka and his wife, Merit. They were ordinary but incredibly well-respected people. And right now, like everyone else in the village, they're finishing up their long workday. Now, notice the unhurried sequence of how this workday actually ends. Wooden hoes, having turned the earth, now rest across tired shoulders. Bundles of reeds are tied neatly with strips of woven fiber. And clay water jars, which are thankfully much lighter than they were at dawn, are carried home one careful step at a time. No one is rushing. The work has just found its natural stopping point as the first stars begin to appear. But tonight isn't just any night. The village is filled with this quiet, buzzing excitement. A festival is about to begin. Ka walks beside his family toward the temple courtyard. The path is decorated with colorful flowers gathered right along the Nile. Small clay lamps line the entrance, and as darkness slowly approaches, each lamp is carefully lit. Tiny golden flames begin dancing in the gentle breeze, and the entire courtyard glows with this warm, peaceful light. For the people of ancient Egypt, festivals like the beautiful Festival of the Valley were so much more than just loud celebrations. They were profound moments of cosmic gratitude. A chance to thank the gods, gather with family, and share food and stories. Families arrive from nearby villages wearing their cleanest linen clothing. Women decorate their hair with beautiful lotus flowers. And men carry baskets filled with fresh bread, dates, figs, and vegetables. Arriving at the temple is just a profound sensory experience. The sweet smell of incense fills the evening air, and temple musicians prepare their instruments. A harp begins playing a slow, peaceful melody. A wooden flute joins in softly. We even know from the historical record that they used curved ivory clappers and small hand drums to gently keep the rhythm. Meanwhile, lectors quietly recite soothing passages from sacred scrolls. The music is calm, relaxing, almost hypnotic. Children smile as they listen, some beginning simple, unhurried dances beneath the glowing lanterns. Let's step a bit further inside, into a space like the Great Hypostyle Hall. Just imagine walking into a massive, awe-inspiring stone forest, lit only by flickering lamps and the stars above. The sheer scale of this architecture was deliberately designed to make you feel enveloped, protected, and completely removed from the daily grind. And what's truly brilliant here is the architectural symbolism. Those massive stone columns, they weren't just holding up the roof. The closed bud and open papyrus capitals were designed to mimic the primordial marsh from the very dawn of creation. So, by walking through these columns, villagers were symbolically walking through the origins of the universe, emerging from the waters of chaos into perfect order. This quote really hits the nail on the head. The temple represented a piece of the divine realm on earth, insulated from the impure outside world. Stepping into the temple courtyard was a psychological deep breath. It was a space of pure universal peace, completely insulated from the unpredictable, chaotic world outside. As the evening meal begins, that spiritual peace translates right into communal joy. Long wooden tables are covered with simple but delicious food. The sweet smell of honey cakes and roasting meats fills the air. The entire village gathers around, sitting shoulder to shoulder.
And we actually know exactly what these feasts looked like, thanks to these stunningly preserved provisions found in Ka and Merit's own tomb. Just look at this variety. There was salted fish and roasted birds, fresh bread and warm lentil stew, baskets of cumin seeds, bundles of garlic, cheese, and sweet fruits like grapes, figs, and dates. They even had 13 sealed alabaster jars of sacred oils. It just paints such a grounded, sensory picture of the abundance they shared. But you might be wondering, how did all this food actually get to the people? Well, it was through a process called the reversion of offerings. First, priests presented these massive amounts of food to the god's statue. The Egyptians believed the god consumed only the spiritual essence of the meal. Once that was done, the physical food was distributed to the people. You were literally sharing a meal with the divine. Which leads us to this beautifully simple truth of the Egyptian festival. Everyone shares, nobody eats alone. These festivals reminded every single family that the village only goes stronger when people care for one another. As the meal winds down and bellies are full, the atmosphere softens even more. Older villagers sit together, telling stories passed down through generations. You can just picture wide-eyed children sitting quietly, listening carefully, as the history of their people is shared in the glowing lamplight. And they wove their personal family lives right into the grand tapestry of Egypt. They spoke about the great pyramids and the wise pharaohs of the Old Kingdom. They talked about the kindness of the gods who protected them and the annual life-giving floods of the Nile that sustained every generation, each story becoming a part of their own history. Speaking of the Nile, a lot of the gratitude during these festivals was directed toward Hapi. Hapi was the divine cosmic force and regulator of the Nile's annual flood. His predictable waters meant life and prosperity. He ensured the harmony between the natural world and human civilization, and honestly, thinking of him brought a profound sense of security to the villagers. As the night deepens, the moon rises above the Nile, casting a shimmer across the peaceful water. The music grows softer, the dancing slows. Many people quietly sit beside the river. Ka smiles quietly to himself. These evenings are among his favorite moments of the entire year. There is no work, no hurry, nowhere else to be. Only family, friends, music, and gratitude for another peaceful season beside the river. To the ancient Egyptians, this overwhelming feeling of nighttime peace wasn't just a mood, it was a religion. It was the literal embodiment of Ma'at. Ma'at was the fundamental concept of cosmic order, balance, and truth that repelled chaos. When the village was at peace, when families were together, when the river flowed steadily, that was Ma'at in action. The universe was exactly as it should be. Eventually, one by one, the clay lamps slowly burn lower. The cool night air feels wonderfully refreshing after the warmth of the day. Ka, Merit, and the rest of the villagers gently gather their sleeping children and begin the quiet walk home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. I absolutely love this quote from our sources. Silence in ancient Egypt was not the absence of sound, it was a gentle collection of quiet things living together. As they walked home, they didn't hear empty silence. They heard the steady flow of the river, the soft rustle of reeds, and the slow, rhythmic breathing of a village settling into rest. Tomorrow, life will return to its familiar rhythm. The wooden hose will be picked up again, the fields will need tending, the fishing boats will sail, and the markets will reopen. But tonight, the peaceful memories of music, laughter, and family gently remain. The quiet village slowly falls asleep beside the timeless Nile, resting under the safe protection of cosmic order. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on. As the quiet village falls asleep beside the timeless Nile, what peaceful memories will you carry into the night? Thank you for taking this unhurried journey with me. Keep learning.
Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to take a really deep breath and just let go of the modern world for a second. Seriously, forget the glowing numbers on your phone, the hum of the fridge, all that endless traffic. We're leaving all of it completely behind. Imagine instead that a warm evening is slowly settling across the Nile Valley, and palm trees are swaying gently in this perfect cool breeze. We're going to hang out with Ka. He's this ordinary yet totally remarkable royal tomb foreman from the village of Deir el-Medina as he just settles in for the night. We're exploring a world where gods literally sailed boats through the stars, and where the end of the day meant something way more profound than just closing your eyes.
So, the absolute crucial thing to wrap your head around with ancient Egyptian culture is that they didn't look at sleep as just, physical rest. It was this deeply spiritual event. For them, sleep was literally a daily ceremonial rehearsal for the afterlife. It was a plunge straight into the unknown. When an ancient Egyptian lay down on their reed mat at night, wrapped up in linen, they weren't just recovering from a hard day of building monuments or farming. They were stepping across a massive threshold. They genuinely believed that what you experienced in the dark was just a sneak peek of the grand, eternal journey waiting for your soul when your physical body finally stopped waking up.
Section 1. Dusk falls on the Nile.
Picture this. The day's work is totally done. Fishing boats are resting along the riverbank, and smoke is rising softly from mudbrick homes while families gather together for dinner. The rhythm of life here wasn't measured by glowing screens or ticking clocks like we're used to. Imagine living in a world where time is tracked simply by the warmth on your skin, the length of shadows stretching across the dirt, and the eternal, steady flow of the river itself. As the stars drift past in total silence, the village of Deir el-Medina just grows quiet, preparing to completely surrender to the night.
Section 2. Sleep, a rehearsal for death.
Now, the ancient Egyptians had this truly fascinating concept of the self. While the physical body rested safely, maybe with their head on one of those wooden headrests or a pillow stuffed with down, they believed your unique spiritual soul, which they called the Ba, would actually leave the body. The Ba was basically your dynamic spiritual personality. During sleep, they thought the veil between our physical world and the divine was incredibly thin, so the Ba would just freely wander the dream world, sometimes soaring, sometimes struggling, and sometimes coming back with these strange, cryptic memories of roofless temples or actual conversations with the gods. It was kind of like a midnight field trip for your soul.
And here is where it gets really interesting. The sleeping traveler was never actually alone. The gods were super involved in your rest. You had Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, basically taking notes on your midnight visions because he knew which dreams actually mattered. Then there was Nephthys, a silent, comforting shadow right by your bed, who you'd invoke if grief or anxiety were keeping you awake. And then there's Serket. She's the goddess of scorpions. Now, having a scorpion goddess watch over you sounds completely terrifying to us today, but back then, she was heavily relied upon for deep comfort. She was the guardian of breath, so if you gasped or tossed and turned in your sleep, Serket was the one protecting your breathing from unseen forces in the dark.
In those wandering dreams, the soul might actually drift into the Duat. Now, this wasn't some scary hellscape, right? It was more of a mysterious glowing passage, like a river beneath the river. This is the exact same shadowy realm where Ra, the great sun god, descended every single night. While the whole village slept, Ra would sail his solar bark through the darkness, fiercely battling the giant chaos serpent, Apophis. So every dream you had of a grand journey, or fighting monsters in the dark, or seeing glowing golden fields, that was thought to be a direct echo of Ra's nightly cosmic battle to make sure the sun would actually rise again tomorrow.
Moving on to Section 3, the weighing of the heart.
As families gathered around the flickering firelight, village elders like Ka's grandfather would share these ancient stories with the kids about the ultimate judgment. The story goes that you'd enter the Hall of Mod, where Anubis, the jackal-headed god, who is actually known for being quite gentle and observant, would guide you to the golden scales. Right there, your life's actions, which were symbolized by your physical heart glowing with all your deeds, would be carefully weighed. But what exactly was it weighed against? The feather of truth.
That feather belonged to Maat, and Maat was way more than just a goddess. She represented the fixed, eternal order of the entire universe. We're talking absolute truth, balance, and justice. Maintaining Maat was literally the whole point of Egyptian religion. In fact, if you had a super chaotic, restless night filled with nightmares, it was often seen as a big red flag that this delicate cosmic balance had been disturbed in your waking life, and you needed to get your harmony back in check.
So how did you make sure your heart stayed light enough to pass the test? Earlier that afternoon, the village priest probably spoke about it, and it really just came down to simple, everyday things. Helping your neighbors, respecting your parents, working with kindness, and speaking the truth. These things weren't taught to scare people with the threat of divine punishment. Not at all. They were taught because the Egyptians deeply valued balance. They knew for a fact that a heart unburdened by cruelty, just filled with kindness and respect, would easily balance perfectly against the feather of Ma'at.
Section 4. The Field of Reeds. For those whose hearts were light, justified, and true, that crazy, perilous journey through the Duat ended in the most beautiful destination imaginable.
the Field of Reeds. This was a peaceful paradise where the Nile just flows gently forever. As Ka listens to his grandfather talk about it, the cool evening breeze brings in the sweet scent of blooming lotus flowers across the river, and you can hear the quiet sound of frogs in the reeds. It was envisioned as this lush, perfect land in the underworld, with absolutely no hunger, no fear, and no pain. Just peace. An eternity where the harvests are always huge and families get to reunite forever. And finally, Section 5, the Eternal Dawn.
Back in the waking world, Ka is just quietly watching the moon rise above the Nile, its silver light dancing perfectly across the water. You know, he's probably wondering what future generations will be like. Like, will kids still play beside this river? Will farmers still plant wheat after the yearly flood? Nobody can really know. But somehow, that steady, eternal flow of the Nile just makes everything feel so timeless. As the warm fire slowly burns down in Ka's mudbrick home, the whole village just surrenders to the quiet mercy of sleep. Because the end of the day wasn't something to be afraid of. It was just a gentle reminder that every single ending is followed by a new beginning. They found so much deep comfort knowing the sun would always, always rise again over their beloved river.
To wrap up our explainer today, I really want to leave you with this thought. Nowadays, we usually just treat sleep like an off switch, right? Like it's just this biological necessity. But thousands of years ago, it was a sacred journey. It was a nightly exploration of the soul and a literal practice run for eternity. So let this timeless, calming rhythm of the ancient Nile just wash over you right now. As the countless stars watch quietly over the sleeping valley, where will your own dreams take you tonight? Will you wander, will you learn, or will you simply find peace? Thank you so much for exploring this quiet corner of history with me, and I hope you drift into your...
Welcome to this special, calming edition of our explainer. Tonight we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to slow things right down. I want you to take a deep, slow breath, let those shoulders drop, and just join me on a gentle, low-stakes journey back in time. We're traveling to an ancient Egyptian village, right around the year 1400 BCE. There are no tests here, no urgent facts you need to memorize, just the quiet, fascinating beauty of everyday history to help your mind unwind.
Our gentle journey through ancient Egypt is slowly coming to an end for the day. The final glow of sunset has completely disappeared beyond the western desert. The heat of the afternoon is lifting, replaced by this cool, soft breeze drifting across the waters of the Nile. The village has fallen perfectly silent, and you can just feel a deep peace washing over the ancient landscape. You know, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus famously observed that Egypt is the gift of the Nile. And honestly, we can really feel the quiet truth of those words tonight. The Nile was so much more than a river. It was this sacred, gentle giant that literally breathed life into the dry desert. Without it, the land would just be silent dust. But with it, you have life, nourishment, and this amazing, comforting rhythm that sustained generations of people. Section 1. Sunset on the Nile.
Imagine standing right beside that cool water as the agricultural day comes to a tranquil end. The farmers resting in their homes right now? Their lives weren't dictated by the rush or anxiety we're so used to today. Instead, they lived by an eternal 3-season rhythm. You had Akhet, the gentle flooding, Parrot, the quiet planting season, and Shumu, the warm harvest. It's this incredibly comforting cycle of nature, totally reliable and unchanging. They simply trusted the river.
Down by the shoreline, the day's work is completely done. You've got lightweight papyrus reed fishing nets and these simple woven traps just resting after being pulled from the water. Picture a heron standing quietly near the reeds, and maybe, just far away, a crocodile slipping silently into the dark water. The river provided a bountiful, divine gift to the village, giving them a real sense of quiet security as night falls.
Section 2, the starry night sky.
Now, as the village rests, the first stars start to appear. And it's absolutely fascinating how ancient astronomers mapped these heavens. They used this brilliantly simple tool called a merkit. With just an L-shaped piece of wood, a plumb line, and the calm night air, these priests aligned magnificent temples to the heavens in quiet, deliberate precision. Just perfect harmony between the earth and the stars. A really crucial number in this cosmic map was 36. The Egyptians actually divided the sky into 36 decans. Basically, these were peaceful star groups that rose every 10 days. And tonight, while the villagers sleep, these decans are acting as gentle star clocks, silently and faithfully, measuring out the dark, quiet hours of the night. Above them all, though, are the imperishables. These were the never-setting circumpolar stars that the Egyptians believed represented the undying souls of the blessed. As you lie in the dark, imagine these stars providing a comforting, eternal blanket of protection over the sleeping world. They're keeping watch over them, and over us too. Section 3. A quiet village evening. Let's step away from the riverbank and look inside one of these small mud-brick homes. Through an open doorway, we can imagine a boy named Khan sitting quietly beside his parents. His younger brothers and sisters have already fallen asleep. They've just finished a simple, really nourishing evening meal. We're talking emmer wheat bread, warm lentils and chickpeas, some scallions, and the sweet, calming taste of dates and rich honey. These simple blessings were often their greatest treasures. And actually, making that bread for tomorrow was a real art of patience. First, grinding the emmer wheats, mixing the sourdough, and then heating these heavy clay veggemolds. Finally, they'd bake the dough slowly in hot ash. The warm, earthy smell of that freshly baked bread still lingers in the cool night air, already covered with linen cloth for the morning.
Section 4. Inside the mudbrick home. Inside, the room is bathed in this incredibly soft golden light. A simple, ancient oil lamp, fueled by animal fat and resting on a beautifully carved wooden stand shaped like a papyrus stalk, just flickers gently. What's amazing is that this simple tradition of the indoor oil lamp actually goes back 15,000 years. It provides this warm, flickering glow that perfectly softens every single shadow in the room. There's a beautiful contrast here if you think about it. Outside, you have this massive, macro scale of the vast, timeless river making its endless journey under the cosmos. But inside, it's all about the intimate, cozy micro scale of a tiny flame burning quietly in a bronze lamp. Both are peaceful, and both are exactly as they should be.
Section 5. Resting on woven beds.
When it was time to sleep, families rested on these beautifully crafted wooden beds. They actually had strung cord mattresses that gave this gentle, supportive bounce. They'd pull clean, soft linen sheets over themselves. And for a pillow, they rested their heads on smooth wooden headrests, which they carefully wrapped in soft fabric to create a surprisingly stable, soothing cradle for their dreams. We actually know all these exact details thanks to perfectly preserved items found in the real tomb of a man named Ka and his wife Merit. Now the last lamps are extinguished. In our story, young Ka steps onto the flat roof of his family's home. The cool desert air feels so refreshing after the heat of the day, and above him, the stars seem brighter than ever. The families have closed their eyes to the quiet lullaby of the river. The whole village sleeps completely without hurry.
Section 6. A peaceful, ancient slumber.
I invite you right now to close your own eyes. Let the muscles in your face and your shoulders just soften. Sink into whatever is supporting you, feeling entirely safe and totally relaxed in the quiet of this ancient night. Outside, the Nile continues its journey toward the Mediterranean Sea. It never rushes, it never stops. Century after century, it simply flows. Let its imaginary waters carry away any remaining worries from your day. Patient, peaceful. Let your breathing match the slow, deep rhythm of that ancient world at rest. Patient and peaceful. May your night be deeply restorative. But before you drift away completely, I want you to ponder one final thought. Thousands of years from now, what simple, quiet moments from our own everyday lives will still be remembered as beautiful? Thank you so much for joining me. Have a truly restful slumber, and good night.